So hello and welcome to the Journey to a Dream podcast, brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. I'm just going to say at this point, if you hear any random banging during this episode, there's some flooring being put on above our heads, so don't worry about it. I'm thrilled that we've got our guest with us today, who is going to be able to give us an insight into sort of the background, I suppose, to how racing is able to happen here on the Isle of Man and also further afield as well. He's also got quite an interesting, certainly a passion, or it has been something that's been involved with and been incredibly good at for a number of years. And we're possibly going to be talking about cats as well. Darryl, welcome to the podcast. Darryl Hill, how would you describe yourself in a couple of sentences?
Hard-working, I think. Busy. I throw myself into a lot of opportunities, which I think at a young age was always quite unusual. And that's sort of how I think got me into the roles and positions that I'm in now. And yeah, I just like to push myself and take a few risks and reap the rewards for what that offers.
So take us back then. What would Darryl of, say, I don't know, sort of 5 or 6, if you've got any memories sort of that far back, what would he have thought he wanted to do when he was older?
That would have been snooker, definitely. I mean, I had the interest in the bikes because my dad raced. Dad Jez Hill, he raced, and so I was always around that lifestyle, and I was always helping him in the paddock and things. But my main passion was snooker from a very young age.
And where did that come from?
Well, it started with my granddad. Actually, used to play in like a working men's club. And this was actually in the UK when we lived over there, and it was quite a hobby for him. He'd go down with his mates and play like league snooker and things in the working men's club, and he used to watch it on the TV, and I used to watch it with him and quite enjoyed watching it with him. And then he got me a small table, like I don't know, it was maybe even like a 4-foot thing or something like that. That was in the lounge, and I just loved it and never got off it from there. And then it just progressed. And I remember I got just sort of like something bigger than a pool table for Christmas one year, and I was about 8, and again spent loads of time on that. And then it actually became quite apparent that I was quite good at this game, playing on that. And then that's when we sort of, I think Mum and Dad wanted to just see if I could take this a bit further and actually see how good I could get. So.
And who did you want to be? Who were the snooker players that you watch on the telly that you thought you wanted to be like?
It was Jimmy White when I was that age, because he was still, I mean, he was obviously, that wasn't really his era, but he was still quite high up in the pro ranks, and he had the following, and he had the the big charisma when he played, and so yeah, he was sort of the idol that I had.
And it sounds like you had very supportive parents who wanted to encourage what was clearly, as we mentioned, a passion of yours. What sort of route did that take then? Did you go to a lot of different clubs? I mean, how do you progress in that world?
Yeah, so we moved to the island when I was 6. So the snooker had really, it was over here that on the island that it became quite serious. And I think it was, obviously Mum and Dad knew I enjoyed playing the game, so then they started to take me to a club. But I think it was when other people who were quite knowledgeable about the game actually saw me, and actually they realised that I had something with this game. And I think it's when they then mentioned to Mum and Dad, actually he's got something here, and we need to get hold of him, and if you'll let us. And so they took me under their wing, like the coaches on the island, and then started taking me down the club more and doing a lot more with me in terms of, instead of just playing, actually working on technique and things like that. And at that stage on the island, we had the under-17s and the under-21 tournaments, and I was only 10 at the time. And one of the coaches said, I think we should enter him in the under-17s and the under-21s. It wasn't a massive entry over here, because junior snooker's always struggled. But I went in both of them just to have a go, and ended up winning them both in my first year when I was 10. So I think from then on it just progresses. You start entering league stuff. One of the coach that was looking after me, he played in a league team, so I ended up joining that league team. So that got me playing league snooker, and then obviously then I could enter competitions and things like that, and won an individual competition on the island for adults when I was either 10 or 11. It was either the same year or the year after. And then, just progressed and progressed. And
I'm just interested in what makes somebody good at a game like snooker. Obviously you talked about technique, but how much of it is strategy, sort of thinking ahead of a few moves, or does that not really come into it?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, absolutely. I think with anything that you are, well, gifted, if you want to use that term. I don't like to say it about myself, but if you want to sort of use terms like that, you've got to have an air of natural ability. I don't think you can simply choose to be good at something and say, I'm going to be good at this, and get to such a high level. I think you have to have something natural there, because that is literally, before I was taught the strategy and the technique, I just picked a cue up and I was able to do it pretty well without any sort of guidance or anything. And I think I was just very fortunate that I think everybody in life has that one thing that they are naturally gifted at, and I think I'm just very lucky that I found it. I think maybe people go through life and maybe don't find it, and I did. And
I just wonder what your granddad's reaction, if hopefully he was around to see you progress.
Now,
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, how has he found all of this?
Yeah, great, because obviously they get things out of it, and they get to travel with me to the tournaments, and they get to see, especially when I was that age, it was either me, because when we lived here, I managed to get a dispensation to play in England junior snooker events, because we didn't have the field over here, or the standard that I needed to be in. So I managed to get dispensation to play in UK events, which I was really grateful for. So it was either Mum or Dad would take me over, or my granddad would take me over. So obviously for him to come with me, and get to see me playing at that sort of level, and sort of go on the journey with me, if you like, because then it progressed from England to European things, and they get to go to places they never thought they would get to go to because of me and my snooker, So it was nice to give that back to them.
And I think you're incredibly self-effacing here, Darryl, because you are clearly gifted at it, and only very recently been nominated alongside Dollin Mercer for the Sports Team of the Year award at the Isle of Man Sports Awards. There have been many other nominations. Under 21, what you had with the sports...
Yes, I won that, yeah.
Yeah, you won that as well. And I just wonder how important it is when you are on that journey and really following something that you're good at, that you love. How important are those accolades along the way?
Yeah, they are, because it's recognition, really. It's somebody else recognising. I can do something and think I've done that pretty well. I've got a good result there, but for someone else to say it to you shows that in a way you've done more than you thought you had. There was one award I got actually in the snooker world, which was really encouraging, which was the Rookie of the Year. So you can't choose to be a professional snooker player. You can't just decide you're going to be a professional snooker player. You have to qualify for your place on the main tour, and there's only so many routes you can do that with. So for me, it was the European Under-21 tournament that carried a professional ticket for the winner, and I went over to that tournament. I'd had a few goes at it a few years, because with being on the Isle of Man, I was able to always qualify as the number one player to be sent, obviously, from here, even though I was the only one. So I'd had a couple of goes at it, and then I went to Malta that year in 2015, and I'd put a lot of work into that tournament, and I genuinely thought this was my time. And I went there and won the tournament, and turned professional, obviously, later that year. And then at the end of that year, they have the World Snooker Awards, so they have a massive awards night. It was at the Dorchester in London, so it was a really slap up meal, slap up night, everything like that. And I got invited to go, and I'd been nominated for Rookie of the Year, and all the top professionals were there. They were getting Player of the Year, Moment of the Year, all things like that. A couple of players were inducted into the Hall of Fame, a couple of the legends, and I went over and won Rookie of the Year. So that was almost like, because you're, in a way employed by World Snooker, you sign a contract to them, you're working under them. That was almost like your boss sort of coming to you and saying, here's your bonus, or here's for recognition of the work you've done, or something like that. So to me it was the equivalent to that. But then also with the Sports Awards, obviously I won out of the Under-21 Sportsman of the Year that year in recognition of Malta. And then when I'd had me a couple of years on the professional circuit and was taking some time away, they inducted me into the Isle of Man Hall of Fame. That for me is what was really proud of, because that is also making snooker stand out amongst the other sports. It's not just a recognition within your sport. It's actually standing up alongside cycling, swimming, that's so massive on the island. So I was really proud to be able to, and obviously we've done that again this year. We're now taking Dollin away to the team championships, his first major really that was, and then on the back of that we know we're going to get recognised on that night again now. So yeah.
Incredible achievements. Can you ever just play a game of snooker for fun now?
No. No, I genuinely can't. No. And no. I mean, mates sort of ask me, but I can't, because if I start missing a ball or lose concentration, I can't deal with that. No. So if I play snooker, it's got to be proper. So
that's one side of Darryl. The other is motorsport. And you mentioned your dad and the fact you've sort of grown up with your dad being involved. Just tell us a little bit about that and what you remember about his involvement growing up.
Yeah, so there was a club which definitely most of the listeners I think will be familiar with from the biking world. Sort of the late 90s was the Auto 66 Club in the UK. They used to operate circuits like Scarborough, Oliver's Mount, obviously. I think Croft and old circuits called Carnaby, I think, which aren't even going now. And that's what he did, and he actually won a couple of the Auto 66 championships in his day. He started as sidecar passenger, and then progressed up to two-wheel racing. And when I was born, and at a young age, he was in the Auto 66, and I can remember going to Scarborough, Oliver's Mount a lot. That was sort of our weekend getaways. Mum would come in the camper van. And I can remember, him riding around, obviously doing his sessions, doing his races, and Mum would be making the stew or something in the camper van, and that was life. That was paddock life, so he did that, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons we came over here. There was a lot of reasons. Obviously, they used to come over for the TT and for the Manx Grand Prix, and he always wanted to do it, and hadn't done it up to then. But it was a case of when we came over for the TT, I think the age I was as well, they just looked at it as such a safe place to live, and obviously the biking interest, he had friends over here, and so I think all that put together made the decision then for them to come over. So we moved here.
How did you find that move? Do you remember much
sort of?
I
was only 5 or 6, so I remember bits of being in the UK, but that's diminished more over the years now. So it is really just, to me, this is home. This is all I can really remember and really know, apart from maybe the bike meetings. That seems to stand out in the memories. So I think the first year we moved in 2002, and then it was the 2003 Manx Grand Prix that my dad made his debut as a newcomer in that, and I can remember that vividly, being in the paddock. And then of course he did the Southern 100 as well, and was doing Derby as well, and yeah, so he's stuck with that. He's done that all the way through my childhood. Southern 100 really was his main one. He didn't do the Manx that often, but Southern 100 was his one he looked forward to every year, with the mass starts and things like that down there. So he's still got his race licence. He switched to rallying a few years ago as well, and teamed up with another ex-Manx Grand Prix winner, Decca Kelly, who again a lot of people will be very familiar with, and that's been quite nice that them two could sort of have a new interest and do that together, and they've been quite successful at that as well. They've got a lot of trophies out of that, and in their class wins and things, so yeah, it's nice they've still got that interest.
And did you ever want to ride yourself?
Yes, Yeah, so obviously I used to help Dad in the paddock, and it was around, I was a teenager, about 13, 14. I mean, that might sound young, even 15, but that's sort of the age you start. You know, obviously I started snooker at 8 or 8 to 10, and that is the age you have to start, and bike racing is usually when they're 13 or 14 and starting on maybe 125s or something like that. They've already had time as a kid, either karting, on quads, motocross, something like that. So I was around that age, when your dad is in the paddock racing and there's contacts, it's so easy to start. You know, it's just a case of a click of a finger, I could have started. And the temptation was there, but of course at 12, 13, 14 I was already one of the top sort of junior amateur players in the snooker world. So I was really torn, because I thought there's no way I can start racing, I've got to centre around the snooker. We knew I was going down the snooker route, and that was my main focus.
Do you think your parents would have been okay if you'd chosen the other route, just thinking about, you know, the danger element, obviously? I mean, you don't hear of many people getting badly hurt playing snooker, do you? But was that an element, do you think, in their decision making, and the fact that they pushed you down that route?
Possibly, but they've always been really good to let me make my own mind up. You know, there has been no pushing or pressure into going one way or the other. You know, and I've been very lucky with that when I've seen other situations with kids my age. But it's really interesting, because my dad was always the one who said, "You're not going racing." And the amount of dads I know in the paddock who say that to their kids, you know, it's really strange. And, you know, and he was like, "I couldn't cope if you were racing and doing this." And I think, "Oh, okay, right."
Would he have listened to that if his dad had told him the same?
No. But I think if I'd have gone down the route, he would have probably supported me. Whether I could have done it to my mum, I don't know, because obviously I used to like my dad doing it and support him, and obviously getting enjoyment out of that. But then on the other hand, I'd see my mum there and see her, you know, trying to look like she was enjoying it, but I know deep down that she wasn't really enjoying it when he was out on the track. So it's it was quite an easy decision, really, the snooker. But then at the same time, I couldn't walk away from the paddock, and I couldn't just watch either. So that's where I had to find another involvement, and that's how sort of my involvement then with motorsport evolved.
So how did that start then? Tell us.
Well, that's quite a funny story, because there's another person who your listeners will be quite familiar with in the motorsport world, called Dick Hodge, and he has had loads of involvement in motorsport. He was vice president of Andreas Racing, and was sort of one of the few who did a lot originally to that circuit, with just him and a few others, with a lot of their own money and a lot of their own time and things to get the circuit operating as it was. And he had a house in Tremode with a nice garage, and he used to rent the garage or let racers use his garage, which is quite common for the top racers. A lot of the top racers, especially in those days, you often see it, I think, about some of the other ones on the DVDs and that on video clips. They wouldn't use the paddock that much. They'd have a setup in the paddock, but at night they'd take the bikes elsewhere and into a home garage and work privately in there. And he'd let them do that. And my dad ended up helping, and I can't remember how it came about one year, but he ended up helping Nigel Cap Davis, who of course was one of the top TT riders. You know, used to start number 2 or 3 in the TT. Really good character, and he ended up helping him, and he was using Dick's garage. So obviously my dad ended up getting to know Dick quite well, and they hit it off really well. And then I started going round to help out, so I got together with Dick as well. And Dick also was involved with the TT and the Manx Grand Prix, and he held a role which is known as the Deputy Sector Marshal role on the TT course at Brandywell on the mountain. Just
for anybody who might not be familiar with that role, what exactly does that entail?
So the TT course is, for the official purposes, official side of things, is split into 12 sectors around the course, and they're not timing sectors or anything like that, because obviously you've got separate timing sectors. They're specifically for marshalling and control purposes, because obviously it's such a massive circuit. It's easier to split it into its own sectors. So there's 12 sectors around the course, and each sector has a chief sector marshal who is responsible for overseeing their sector, responsible for seeing that it's manned appropriately that every corner has the right number of marshals on, which is a minimum number for insurance purposes. Also making sure it's not overmanned, so they have to split the marshals up and move them to locations. And then every corner basically on the course has a Deputy Sector Marshal. And then when the sessions all go live, so you get bikes on the circuit, the Chief Sector Marshals basically hand over to their deputies, who are then responsible and operate their own corner on the course. So obviously with Dick Hodge, that was Brandywell. So as soon as I was 16 and able to marshal, he said, "Oh, you're going to have to come up with me then, and give it a whirl." And I'd always wanted to do it. I'd always wanted to have a go, and I thought this was my way of trying another role or trying something else in motorsport that was outside of the paddock. So I ended up going up with him to Brandywell as a trainee marshal when I was 16, and then that took off from there. I loved it, loved the corner. Brandywell's a really good corner. It's a really spectacle. It's a spectacle of the course for me. It's really tricky. The riders have got to get it right to get the corner right. They've got to do it a certain way. So that carried on from there. So obviously my dad was quite happy that I'd left the paddock area now. I'd got an involvement. I was doing something. Even at that young age, it sounds daft to say, but I was putting something back in or doing something for the sport. So it just went from there, and then I think it became apparent. I don't know whether it was from the snooker or whatever, but for me, the snooker and the sort of roles I'm in motorsport now, they have similarities, and I think the similarities is, as you touched on before, sort of being able to maybe think ahead, being able to think quickly, and having a level, calm, cool head when you need it under pressure, which obviously I've had to do with the snooker, and all that, I think then made me quite noticeable at a young age to a lot of people, that... Because even marshalling, there weren't that many marshals at 16, never mind going up through the ranks and trying to get more senior roles. And the roles aren't for everybody either, so I think the fact that they could see that there was this young person who could do it, I was sort of quite in demand really from then.
And as you say, it is a tricky section. Unfortunately, we know incidents happen, and I just wonder, certainly at such a young age, what impact having to deal with things like that might have had on you.
Well, and I think this is another thing why you don't get the young age volunteers in particularly in that side of things, because I think there's a lot of reasons. I think one which I can understand with is that, like for me, I'll openly say I don't think I'm normal. I don't think I am. At 16, I don't think I was a normal 16-year-old. I spent a lot of time around adults, maybe not kids my own age. I was actually home educated as well, from high school onwards, so that I could actually do a lot more education at home in the mornings, spend a lot more time on that without disruption, and then I'd spend the whole time playing snooker in the afternoon and evenings. So that's how we centred it around and did a balance. So I was a lot more, if you like, senior for my years, which was a term people used to use a lot. So I don't think people saw me as a 16-year-old, but I remember my very first night on the mountain. Obviously, I was touching on reasons people aren't in the sport at a young age, and I think, like, particularly with my mates, if ever I suggested to people my age, I do marshalling, come up and marshal or give it a go, there was things like they didn't want to dedicate themselves to the whole day in one place. They wanted to be able to move around. They didn't want the thought of being stuck somewhere and seeing no racing, if there was delays or things like that. If you were dragged out for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours without seeing anything. And they just basically wanted to watch on a hedge with a couple of beers, in a group. And I can understand that, that's fine. But that wasn't for me. And then obviously there is the serious side of things, which in a way, although it's bad they happen, and you obviously don't want them to happen. You dread them happening, but in a way, they've got to happen for you to know how you're going to be in those situations, and for other people to see how you're going to be in those situations as well. So I remember my very first night on the mountain when I was 16. We actually had the Birchall brothers on their first lap of the TT that year, practice night. They went straight off the edge at Brandywell, and I was thrown in at the deep end there, because it wasn't that serious. It was quite a dramatic crash, because they left the track or the circuit, and the outfit went through the grass, and it was quite rough at that point, and it sort of dug in as it dropped off the edge and then launched, and it actually went quite high up in the air and then stalled mid-air and just dropped, and the passenger, Tom, was actually still sort of on the outfit at the time, so he was more beaten up than the driver, I had to deal with that with the crew, and again that went okay, and the Birchalls were actually out back in the TT about 3 days later, and they went on to get a podium that year, so there was a really big story about that, which was great for them, and they came up to Brandywell and thanked us all for that, so that was nice, and that was almost like make or break, that was then whether it's for you or not, and it didn't deter me that much, and then I was doing a bit more to help Dick Hodge, because I think obviously because I lived here with Dick, and outside of the TT I was going round to his house a lot, because he then started sponsoring me with the snooker as well, so and obviously with his wife Margaret there was a good family thing going on there, so I'd go around and we used to me and Dad used to help him with housework and garden work and things like that, so we were around there all the time, and so he was learning a lot more about me, and then obviously we had the TT and the Manx Grand Prix the next year, and then at TT 2018 he said, I'm at the point where I'm going to retire from being a Deputy Sector Marshal, he said, and I've been needing to sort of retire for a couple of years, but I haven't had a successor, if you like, and I think you might be it. So the TT then was like a trial where I shadowed him a bit, and he'd let me do, because obviously he's the radio operator as well, so he was letting me do the radio stuff. And you have to do things like brief your marshals every morning, or at the start of every session you've got to get your team together, and you've got to just say you four are doing this and you two are doing that, and so I was doing that instead of him, and he was just there to sort of see how I was doing and things like that. And then the Manx Grand Prix that year, I virtually ran it with him there, and he said obviously I'll step in if I have to, but obviously I don't want to, and obviously the Chief Sector Marshal knew this was going on, so that was all right. And then I can remember that for the Manx Grand Prix senior race or senior day, they were short 2 marshals at the bungalow, and we got a call out, and just to see if any of the other locations on the sector, so our sector, just to give listeners an idea, runs from the veranda through to the 32nd milestone, so that's sector 10 of the 12, so obviously veranda, Graham's, bungalow, Brandywell and 32nd all have a DSM, and then they've all got their team, and the call came out that the bungalow was short, and Dick straight away had the idea and said, I'll go with a friend of mine to the bungalow, you can run Brandywell on your own, and I'll listen to what you're like without me here, and this is your day to, and if it all goes well, then I'll look to step down at the end of senior day, and it was just the most awful, unfortunate circumstance that you would say you couldn't script it, but it happened, and on sort of the day was going fine, the team was great, I'd done all that side of things, the race was going okay, and then it was just an awful year where on the last lap of the senior race, basically all hell broke loose on the mountain, and we knew there was a very serious incident going on at the 33rd on the last lap, because I have a travelling marshal based with me at Brandywell, so that's like a bit of a backup, because obviously the travelling marshals are dotted around the course and only at I think 5 or 6 locations, and Brandywell is the only location on the mountain that has a travelling marshal. The Gooseneck is the previous location, so my travelling marshal had gone to the 33rd, so I'd lost the travelling marshal, and while this was going on at the 33rd, like within 2 minutes later, I had an incident at Brandywell, which unfortunately turned out to be a fatality, and I was thrown in at the deep end to deal with that. I had to lead that incident, I was in charge of it, and Yeah, so it was awful, and it was obviously the worst of circumstances, but from my side of things, if I'd have done something wrong that day or whatever, I wouldn't have got the role, or it would have shown me that I wasn't up to it. But again, with all the experience I had at 18 years of age, and I was dealing with a fatal incident, and I got obviously just a hell of a lot of praise over that, and from everyone who sort of was listening to it and could hear and knew what had gone on, and then had to compile the report at the end of it. And that was it. That led to me ultimately getting the Deputy Sector Marshal role at the age of 18, which I think was pretty unheard of, I think, to be honest.
And we've got a couple of interviews with some of the travelling marshals as previous guests on this podcast, Darryl, and I think the one thing that really always comes through is the fact that when you have to deal with an incident like that, obviously you coped fantastically well and your professionalism absolutely shone through, but the care and the emotion that goes with that is still there, and I think that's what means so much to people. And you know, you're never going to forget it, are you? No,
you're not. No, I mean, I've had multiple incidents since then, touch wood, non-fatal, but with serious ones, because that is just the nature of the corner. You know, there are unfortunately black spots on the course, as there are with any circuit. You know, some corners are going to get more incidents than others, and if they come off there, they're going to be bad. It's I think as well, we've been on the Isle of Man. It's a much more intimate situation with riders, and especially having Dad's involvement as well. You know, and the fatal incident that I dealt with was actually one of my dad's mates, who he used to race with in the UK. But you have to. It's hard to explain, and I think a lot of people outside the motorsport world don't really get it and don't understand it. But you have to. You know, when you sort of see them and know who it is, you can't really think about that. And in the Clarking world, it's sort of exactly the same, you know, but it's worse on the Isle of Man because you have to know the riders. There's no way you can't not know the riders. But you just have to come up with ways to you're there to do a job, and you have to do the job, you know, and the job you can do is to obviously look after them the best you can and do what you can for them, and that's the only way you can sort of view it, I think.
So Darryl, you mentioned the Clarking world there. It seems incomprehensible that we're going to talk about another thing that you are involved with. And I should say at this point, I mean, this is all outside of having, I'm saying it in inverted commas, normal job, a proper job as well. Just remind us what it is you do. Yeah,
so I'm general manager of the Mann Cat Sanctuary in Santon.
How did that come about?
So that came about because I was looking for something to do on a weekend when I was, again, about 10 years old, and we lived in Mount Murray at the time, so I wanted to just have basic something to do on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't play snooker on a Sunday, obviously didn't do my education and stuff that was all done in the week, so I wanted a Sunday afternoon thing. So I remember my mum took me down to the Mann Cat one day on a Sunday afternoon when we were open, just asked if I could start coming up and volunteering, doing what needed to be doing, grooming the cats, whatever. And I was a bit lucky in a way, because obviously Sue Critchell was the lady who ran the sanctuary at the time, and of course unfortunately passed away mid last year. If she was here, she won't mind me saying, but she wasn't particularly fond of children, putting it mildly. So what on earth made her that day say yes? I don't really know. But she said yes, and I started going up there, and we hit it off, really. I started, and I just got more and more involved, and, you know, for whatever reason, she wasn't that happy about many other kids my age going up there or things like that, and it was just, but she was happy with me, and I just ended up helping her more and more and more. And then with the snooker, it was ideal, because when I moved sort of 16 above, and obviously I'd finished my education, and I was on the tour, even on the tour with the snooker, I had a lot of free time, because I couldn't. My job was to be a snooker player then, and my job doing that was when I was off island. So when I was here, you know, I had my practice obviously, but then I had a lot of spare time, so I ended up going up and helping Sue, and obviously Sue was getting older as well, so I think she was grateful of more hands-on help as I was getting more and more used to things. So I ended up sort of doing the job she was doing with her in the end, and then also took up the office work and managed all that for her and took all that off her, so she didn't have to do it. And then, yeah, that again, it just progressed and progressed, I think, because I was good at the role. And obviously, she unfortunately got ill a long time ago, actually. It was about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years, that she first got the news that she'd been diagnosed with cancer. And she wasn't going to get better from it, but it was manageable for a period. So very, very quickly on there, she was able to obviously sit me down and tell me all this, and because she was more like family in a way as well, you know, and so she was able to put the plan in place. It really was helpful knowing, you know, as awful as it is, that there was something that wasn't going to get better. So we were able to put the plans in place, and then I gradually took more and more off her as the years went on. So that then when obviously she did pass away, I was able to then slip straight into the general manager's role. So obviously there's directors, trustees, there's a management committee, and then I have the general manager's role now to oversee all the sanctuary and obviously carry it on in Sue's memory. So.
Wow, not an insignificant task though, because I mean it's been a staple on the Isle of Man for such a long time, hasn't it, and performed such important work. Have you taken many strays home?
No, I haven't.
Is that a rule you've got?
That's a rule I've got. Okay. Yeah. At home it's dogs. At home it's dogs. But actually, I mean, there is actually a house at the sanctuary that comes with the general manager's role now. So I'm also on site overnight now. So technically, I've got 200 cats at home now, but they don't come in the house. that's the rule.
Okay, Darryl. We're now going to talk about the clerking side of it, and you know, aside from genuinely wondering how you have the time, you must be the most organised person I think I've probably ever met. Talk us through how this side of the motorsport world developed for you.
So this came about, obviously I've been marshalling on the mountain since the age of 16, and then became Deputy Sector Marshal at 18. Never did anything at Derby in terms of marshalling or that. And I can't really remember, but I remember obviously my dad was still racing up there, and he helps ride, and he runs his own team and helps riders. So obviously they were racing at Derby to get their signatures and things like that, to get their mountain course licence. So I was up there around Derby, and I just remember hearing and seeing loads on the news about how short they were of officials, and I just remember answering an advert somewhere, and just basically outlining what I did in terms of the TT, and most of the TT officials at that time were Derby officials as well, so they knew of me anyway, from obviously being the DSM, and obviously I think through being the young DSM who dealt with obviously that awful incident at the Manx. So I think on the back of that probably helped, and I just answered an ad where they were short of a clerk of the course, and I thought that sounds pretty. I've got some free time, you know. I'm not doing anything else. Give it a whirl. So I answered the ad, and I went up for one meeting towards the end of the year, I think. And basically, all you do then is just basically sit in like race control and see how it works and operates, and see what the role is, and just and basically for the first day, that's all you do really. You help on the start line a bit and things like that with the radio, just listen. And you don't really have a role, obviously. You just see what it's like, and then at the end of that, I said, well, I think this, you know, I could be okay at this. I think I could quite like this. So that progressed from there. Then I ended up going up more, shadowing them, and then they just sort of they integrate you bit by bit into the clerking world, and they let you do more and more in terms of having the radio a bit and having some time on the radio, because the clerk obviously operates the course. And
just give us, if you can, a sort of a brief outline of the roles? I know, obviously, making sure that it's fit to race from a sort of weather and conditions point of view, presumably. But what else is involved?
Well, basically, as the ACU puts it, the clerk of the course is the chief executive official of a meeting. So the clerk of the course has ultimate responsibility for everything, every aspect, so obviously, yes, you're making sure the course is fit to run on. That often involves going up before the event. Well, it's necessary, really. You go up and do a track walk before the event, and you're checking everything, like any loose stones, any loose curbs. Are the runoffs okay? Because obviously you've got to think of your problematic corners, and if riders coming off, where they're going to slide, are they going to hit anything that's loose? So you're trying to make it as safe as possible. And yeah, you are the one at the helm of that meeting.
And did you find anything daunting about that prospect, about being essentially responsible?
The only thing I find daunting, and it was the same on the mountain as I find the two roles very similar now. I think having the clerk aspect and taking that back to Brandywell, since I have been a clerk, the role is exactly the same, in a way. And I think there's a lot of DSMs obviously don't know the clerk role and don't know that they are effectively being clerks of the course. But it's exactly the same, because even though, so as a clerk at, say, Derby or Alton Park across where I go, or Anglesey, you're obviously in charge of 1.7 miles of track to 2 miles of track. The TT, I've still got nearly a mile of track myself there, and I'm ultimately responsible for that. So I'm still making the decisions on that. Even though there is a clerk of the course at the TT, obviously, he's going on what I'm going on. When I clerk at a short circuit meeting, I can see the whole track, so I can still effectively make my own decisions, even though I've got the marshals to give me more informative details. Whereas, the clerk of the course at the TT is solely going on what I'm telling him. So, if I need something stopped or something is going on, I have to be the one to make that call. The thing I found daunting really was my age and being accepted or being recognised as responsible enough at my age. Because obviously you're going to people a lot older than you who have more years involved, and standing and looking at them effectively saying, I'm in charge of you, I'd like you to do this, go and do it.
And some of those decisions, presumably, Darryl, aren't going to be that popular?
No, they're not. No. And also, and you know when you're saying that to them, there are people who look at you and think you're not up to this, or, I'm not going to take that from you, or trust that you're going to be able to make this call, for a 19-year-old to be able to run a full short circuit meeting, including, so like, to give an idea, obviously you've got my day, as well as you've got your pre-day checks, so you've got the club working behind the scenes who are putting the entries together with your race secretaries. They're sorting the programme out. You've got to make sure the programme goes off, and even that has to have specific things in, which is an ACU regulation, like warning things of dangers and that. So you've got to make sure that's been done correctly. You're liaising with your chief marshal to make sure that you've got enough marshals to run the event. So yes, it's the chief marshal's role, but I can't get to a meeting and the chief marshal come to me and say we haven't got enough marshals. That should have been something I've sorted before the meeting. Your scrutineers as well, you're making sure that they're going to be there. You've got your chief technical officer, but they're all working under the clerk of the course effectively. The clerk, I'm still responsible for all of them. And then it's sort of 6 a.m. on the morning of a meeting, our day starts, where we're contacting the Met Office, thinking about what weather's going to be, because obviously weather still plays a part in a short circuit meeting. So you're sorting out with the Met Office there what's going to be, how the day's going to pan out, because at a short circuit meeting you're going to have to go through dry spells to wet spells, and you carry on running in the rain, and you've got to manage the changing conditions as to when you allow tyre changes and officially declaring wet racing from dry racing and whatever. So you need to have a plan of that in advance of the day. And then when you get to the circuit, obviously signing on has opened, which the race secretaries are doing, but you've got to be on hand in case they have an issue with somebody who's maybe not got the correct licence, or they forgot their licence, or whatever. I must say, coffee's a strong point on a morning. You can imagine.
You could just got it on a drip. I mean,
yes.
Do you actually ever sleep? Do you have problems sleeping, Darryl? Because
on the night before a meeting, yes, definitely. Yeah, you do, because you're apprehensive. And then you've got 2 briefings to run, which is daunting. That not now, obviously, because now you've got the trust of the circuit. But if ever you go to a new circuit, or when you're a 19-year-old for the first time giving your briefings, you've got your marshals and medics briefing. So you're going through, you're telling the marshals how I'm going to run this meeting, and this is the procedures I'm going to do, which can differ slightly from clerk to clerk. So you'll have marshals who'll say, oh, well, he does it differently, and I like how he does it. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm doing it my way, and live with it, basically, in a nice way. And your medics as well, because obviously you're then dispatching your medics to certain locations around the course, and you have to make sure that they're okay with how I'm going to operate, and then obviously your riders are getting scrutineered and things like that, and then you've got to run a riders briefing as well. So when I've done the marshals and medics, I send them off on their way. They're all getting into their positions. Then I've got to go up to the race office and the paddock and then do a riders briefing as well.
I'm just listening to this and thinking about your work at the Mann Cat Sanctuary, and wonder if you feel sometimes like you are herding cats.
I think the cats are easy to deal with sometimes, actually, but you might have to edit that bit out. But anyway, yeah, cats are easier. So, and to give the listeners an idea, we have the first bike on track at 9:30 a.m. So all of this has to be done before 9:30 a.m. Once the riders' briefing is over, we then do a full course inspection. Track inspection, so the course car goes around with the incident officer on board and the chief steward. So the chief steward is appointed by the ACU as basically an overseer of the event. So somebody has to see that obviously the clerk of the course is running as per the regulations. So the chief steward goes round, and then you have to officially sign the track off and have all this done to get the first bike underway at 9:30 a.m.
Easy.
And when you open the gate for first practice at 9:30 and the first bike goes out, that is the first time from 6 o'clock in the morning that you actually sit down and breathe a sigh of relief and just have a deep breath and go, right. But to a lot of people, that's when the day's just beginning. Your first bike's underway, that's just going. Like the TT, when you think 6:20 at night on an evening practice, and first bike's underway, you think that's it, TT's underway now. Well, it's not, because all the preparation that's gone into that beforehand, that's the first time we sit down and go, right, we've done it, let's just... And that's, you give yourself a little pat on the back with your race control team, with your deputies and all that, and just go, great job, we're underway, But then the track's live, so then straight away you're ready for something to happen on track. But that's sort of the first time that you do stop for a minute at 9:30 in the morning.
And you mentioned regulations sort of in passing, and I just wonder, for anybody who thinks, actually, this is something that I'm interested in, I'd like to find out more. I'm guessing, Darryl, it's not just a case of, you're clearly very well suited to this sort of role, and you've demonstrated that in so many different areas. You can't just rock up and just be good at it on the day. There's a lot of background preparation and getting to know the regulations. I mean, is there anything that you have to go through from a qualification point of view? Yeah,
quite a lot. I mean, it took me probably 2 to 3 years to actually be able to clerk a meeting myself. So you go up as an assistant first of all, and you have to shadow the clerks as an assistant, and as I said, they'll suss out how good you are and what you're capable of doing and whether the role is suited to you or not, and they'll start to get you more and more involved, and then you have to do so many meetings as an assistant then before actually attending a seminar run by the ACU. Sometimes that's done on the island. I actually had to go to Rugby to do mine because it's every 3 years and they try and do the Isle of Man clerks together, so they all fall under the same expiry date or renewal date, whereas I was outside of that because I just decided to start in the middle of that, so I had to go across and do mine. Once you pass that, you have to know the what they call the ACU handbook a bit, which is your Bible, if you like. That's what we have the handbook with us, and that is our gospel, what we go on.
How well do you reckon you know that now? Would I be able to test you?
Yes, yeah, you have to. But it's funny because some of it you have to know immediately. Some of it you can take your time with as a team and just look through it and just think, yeah, we are doing the right thing here. That's more like penalties or things like that, or just double checking a race result. If you've stopped a race prematurely, you just want to make absolutely certain that you don't have to restart. You're making the right decision there and things like that. But
has there ever been a point where you thought, I've made the wrong decision, and how do you handle that?
Yeah. I mean, luckily, nothing has gone massively wrong when I've made sort of a decision. I wouldn't say it's maybe a wrong decision. There's just maybe something's happened where I've wished I could have done it differently. I wouldn't say it's maybe wrong or it was catastrophically wrong, but you learn from it. I think that's important. You accept that you learn from it. The steward might come up to you and say, so at the end of a meeting, the chief steward sits you down and has a meeting with you and goes through things and says, yeah, you did this good, you did this good. However, that decision you made, I think maybe you could have done that a bit differently. And then we'll have a discussion about that and think, yeah, I agree. Or I might come to him and say, I think I did this. I could have handled that better. Maybe done something more efficiently or something like that. But luckily you have a team around you, which is good. So yes, you're the clerk of the course, and yes, you have a decision to make. But you do have a team, and you can make. And quite often it's a team effort. But when you're clerking, I was very lucky because when you go over to the ACU and you do this seminar and you get a licence, you have to then be a deputy clerk of the course. So you can't obviously run a meeting. If he thinks you're up to it, the clerk can maybe go to the toilet during a race, which we try to avoid, but it obviously can happen. And he can say, right, you're in charge now, and the deputy can make authority decisions whilst the clerk is not in the room. Basically, that's so the clerk might be dealing with something serious or like a protest, or he might have to have a rider down and talk to him, and he'll just say, you take over now and run it for a bit. But I also then managed to get with a club in the UK, which is absolutely necessary, and it's a necessity. Just because circuits are obviously bigger across, they have more entries, which is naturally they have more entries because they've got a further band of area for riders to come into, and more happens when it's chance of probability. When you have more entries, more bikes on a grid, more is going to happen. So you're very quickly thrown into dealing with a lot more things there, and that's where you find your mettle. If you're up to doing it over there, that's where you get your licence then. And then that gives you the confidence as well. If you're able to run at Alton Park or Anglesey, which are the two circuits I've primarily done with the Wirral 100 Club, and it was nice to be able to come back to Derby then, because I came back to Derby and I was actually able to implement some of the stuff that I'd learnt over there to making Derby more efficient and better. And that's made the whole paddock and the officials and all the riders much more happier, and it's been a happier place to run at.
And the Andreas Racing Association, I'm still fairly new to meeting some of the people there, but there's such a team mentality, isn't there? I mean, it's almost like a family mentality. There's just that interdependence. Everybody knows everybody else's role and how important those roles are, and it seems to be working really fantastically well as a grassroots organisation, promoting what you all love, and that's racing. Yeah,
it is. It's ideal, and I'm glad I came. I'm glad they approached me and brought me back into it, because obviously they were quite new to it when they came into the current committee now. At the time, were quite new to doing something like that. And it did run for a year, I think, without me there while I was in the UK doing what I was doing over there. And I think with Derby, in the past, with Derby having the same sort of officials as the TT, it was run as a mini TT event. It was run as a road race. And it's a bit hard to explain what I mean by that, but it was... Your incident management is different at a short circuit. You're running Obviously, at the TT, you run, actually for racing, you run 2 races a day, maybe 3, over 2 or 3 laps, and it's long distance. And incidents, if you have an incident on the TT course, it's quite a big thing, because obviously there's things, riders can come in contact with that aren't on the short circuit. And you can have an incident that stretches 20-30 minutes while you're dealing with it, so it's got to be flagged well and everything. And your marshals, I wouldn't say take your time, but but your marshals, you call the helicopter in, obviously, and things like that. And with a short circuit event, it's massively different. We run between 16 to 20 races a day on a short circuit, one after the other, and you've no time for delays. You cannot delay things, and this is where good clerking comes into it. You can't stop a race unnecessarily. That's bad clerking. You have to be absolutely certain when you're. And I think when you mentioned before about daunting, I think that really is the daunting part. When you first call your first red flag as a clerk, which effectively brings the whole track to a stop. Everything comes to a standstill. And you've got to be absolutely certain when you make that call that you need it, because it's going to cause a delay. There's things on a short circuit like we have mass starts, so you can have 30 bikes on a grid, and the lights go out and they all go off like a bat out of hell, and it's dangerous, and that is, you don't get that at the TT. And when you get a race start underway and everything's gone well, you don't want to repeat that. You don't want to have to do that again. You get them through the first couple of corners where you can have the chances of 2 to 3 bikes coming off together and have a pile-up, and everything's gone well. You do not want to repeat a race start. So, when you get an incident then in the race, you want to be able to manage it, and your marshals have to be able to clear it. And the marshals didn't really know how to do that, because it was just so easy to stop the race, and it was very laid back up there, and the time dragged on. Short circuits, you have cut-offs, so you're running a lot of races with multiple incidents during the day. It rains during the day, things like that, and you have to be off the circuit by, say, 6 o'clock at night, which does not give you a lot of time to run practicing and 20 races. And you cannot run over. If you run over 6 o'clock, there is no option. You have to stop. So you lose races, you lose laps, and the racers are disappointed. You can't do that. You don't really have that at Derby, but that doesn't mean for me that you can be laid back. We still run it now. So anyway, we came back into. Linda approached me and said, "Would you come back to Derby?" And I said, "Well, yes," but I said, Derby's still not being run as I'm now running it. I said, "Derby, we need to make some changes if you're up for it." So they had a bit of a meeting with me and saw what I was sort of meaning, and her and Neil Champion, of course. They liked the idea, and I said also for the racers' point of view, because we're encouraging new racers through Andreas to come up, and we don't want them to learn how to race with us and then have to adapt to something completely different when they go over to Alton Park. That's not how it should be. Derby is its own short circuit. So anyway, we put that into practice, and again that was a bit nerve-wracking for me, that first meeting that weekend. Because I was showing them all a new thing. I'd had a chat with the marshals and I said, look, when we have an incident now, I'm going to try and talk you through it on the radio. We're not going to stop unless we have to stop. So if obviously the rider is in immediate need of medical attention, then we stop. Of course we do. Rider is the priority. But if the rider is fine, we are not stopping this race. We are going to deal with it. And that's where the good clerking comes from. That you've got to be able to think clearly, you've got to be able to manage it. And you've got to be able to stay calm, because if your voice on the radio changes and you go into panic, the marshals pick up on that, and you can't allow that to happen. So even though deep down you're thinking this is quite bad, this is a bad situation, you've got to just take a breath, and you've got to manage that incident and manage the marshals and manage the medics, and keep cool and keep a hat on everything that's going on.
And it feels to me that this is where it circles back to your snookering, when you have got a shot presumably and there's so much relying on it, you can't lose your head, can you?
No.
So all of these skills that you've developed in your various roles seem to have culminated to what just sounds like the perfect job for you.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and it is when you've clerked a meeting and every day is different. Every day will throw something up. You know, there'll be a technical infringement that you've got to maybe penalise or disqualify a driver or rider.
You must hate doing that. It must be so tough.
It's difficult. It's difficult on the island because you know them and you try not to. It's handy because race control obviously is miles away from the paddock. So when I go into race control, I shut myself away. I don't know the riders. And it sounds pretty. I don't know the word really, but pretty maybe insensitive. But when I see them going around the track, these bikes, they're objects. They're not people. I don't know them. I don't know their families. Don't know their backgrounds. They're just objects. And if one of them comes to grief on the track, that's a problem now that I've got to solve. Obviously I know the number. The number comes through to me. I know who the rider is. But at that moment in time, they're just a problem I've got to deal with.
You have to depersonalise.
You have to. Yeah. And my responsibility to them is to, a bit, as I said, with the mountain course, is to manage their incident as best I can and give them the best care, or ensure they get the best care that I can make sure they get, which is by then scrambling medical vehicles to them, the nearest ones, the best ones, as many as they need, doctors, whatever, and just doing what I can for them. So you never know what the day's going to throw up, and some days are a lot harder than others. And then when you've got to the end of a meeting, and obviously everyone we all say to each other, great job guys, we've done well today. It's just nice. I always just try and sit down just on my own for just a couple of minutes, just because your head is pounding. You haven't stopped all day, and I do think sometimes I get as much adrenaline from it as maybe the riders do because of the high pressure that I'm dealing under. And then you just sit down and think, I've done that. We've got through today. That was a great day, and it is the best. I think it's one of the best jobs that you can do. It's not for everyone, but I think if everyone wants to give something a go in racing, I would really recommend the Clerk of the Course role, because it's just when you get it right. As long as you talk well, which I was very lucky. My guys at the Wirral 100 were so great with me, and that I couldn't have had a better group, and I had to do my assessment with them, which was an independent person from the ACU came and oversaw how I ran a meeting, and they ultimately decided whether I could then get the correct licence. But when you're taught well and you do the job well, it's the most rewarding thing in racing for me you can have.
We know that you can't play snooker for fun. I'm curious as to how you switch off, Darryl. What do you do in your downtime? Music.
So my mum's actually a music teacher. She was a primary school teacher, and then she taught music privately at home, and so she's got me into that. So it's piano and a little bit clarinet, but I'm a piano player. And at night every night I play piano before I go to bed, and that's my shut off for the day.
What do you play? What's your favourite thing to play?
So my favourite one. Favourite composer is somebody called Ludovico Einaudi, who I don't think your listeners will know maybe by name, but I guarantee you will know his music. So he's a piano player, and he has string orchestras with him. He's the biggest selling classical artist in the current era, and any music you hear on the telly, any background piano music on either things like X Factor or whatever, it was actually on I was addicted to the Traitors on BBC. That's my go-to programme. And even in the finale of that, there was piano music playing in the background, and it was Ludovico Einaudi's. And I'm absolutely besotted with him and his music, and it's really calming. Play all his stuff, go and see him live. I've been to see him live multiple times, going again in July, and it's just the most magical experience, and that's my shut-off. Put him on.
I won't lie, I'm quite relieved you mentioned the Traitors, because I was hoping you were going to say you sit on the sofa with a bag of crisps and just watch rubbish on television. Traitors wasn't rubbish. We could talk about that in more detail. Darryl, it's been a fascinating insight into your world and the background world of motorsport. If there is anybody listening who thinks either marshalling or potentially looking at clerking in the future, and they're thinking, actually, I am interested in that, particularly if they are a little bit younger, what would be the best piece of advice you would give them? Where should they start?
Definitely for me at Andreas Racing. Definitely at the short circuit as a marshal or even as a clerk. You don't have to have. Yes, it helps. You don't necessarily have to have much racing experience or background knowledge to be a clerk of the course. It can be taught. It's if you're cool-headed and can make decisions under pressure and keep calm, then that will send you a long way into that role. But marshalling, definitely at Derby. Marshalling, there's a lot of people who think marshalling at Derby is the same as the TT, and it's not. And there's a lot of people who don't want to do the TT. Short circuit marshalling is much different. It's much rewarding for me. You're doing so much more hands-on stuff. With clearing incidents, with dealing with oil spills, whatever. It's one day essentially, 2 days if you do a test day on the Saturday, but it's just a Sunday. You're with a group of people, you're not on your own. It's fun, it's less hectic than the TT, even though it's more full on in one way or another. It's not the busybody of a TT race, TT sort of setup. So come up to Andreas, get marshalling there. We have incidents, of course we do. It's very rare they're bad on a short circuit. It can happen, again, touch wood, but a lot of incidents, they're sliding off, you're clearing them, you're underway, you're what we call green again, if you like, when we're clear. We've gone green within 30 seconds to a minute of somebody coming off, so and the race continues. We don't stop. It's not a big drama. We deal with it as a team and we get it done, and you'll be part of a great team and great bunch of people, and you'll just have a really good day. So contact the Andreas Racing website, Facebook, whatever, and come up and join in.
And once again, we'll put the links on the podcast page to the Andreas Racing Association. And just finally, we're sitting here coming up to the start of February 2025. How are you feeling about the upcoming season?
Really good, really good. We've got, obviously we're starting quite early this year. The end of March is the first race meet, and there's a test before then. It's a busy March for me because I've got 2 test meetings, a race meeting, and I've actually been invited to a brand new snooker tournament in California, which is the US Masters. There's only 48 players being invited, and I'm one of the seeds for the tournament. So, yeah, that wasn't part of the plan, but something you can't say no to. So March is going to be hectic, but the racing season is going to be good. We've got, obviously, I think that's the thing at Derby as well. Again, not to go on too long, but the standard of riding at Derby is really good. It's surprising. It will surprise you, the calibre of riders we have at Derby. They're all nearly top TT or seeded riders for TT. We've obviously got Ryan Kringle, who's won the Senna Championship 7 times now. He's something else around Derby. We've got his brother Jamie. We've got Marcus Simpson, Paul Cassidy. They're all top TT riders. And you get to see them going, at it on the Derby circuit, in a mass start situation. And of course, there's lots of last lap overtakes, things like that they're all pulling on each other. So it's thrilling. So it's going to be a good season there. There's a lot of what I like at Derby now. There's a lot of young riders coming up who are really promising as well, and they're coming into their own now. You've got Grant Thompson, who's already turned heads, going to be turning more heads this year as he moves up. I think he's making his Mounts Grand Prix debut this year. Another couple of young 600 riders like Alexander Galloway and Freddie Crane, who pushed Grant all the way in the 600 title last year. Unfortunately, had quite a bad accident in the finale, which was a shame. But hopefully, he's recovered and is back for another season. And when you see them go off and do the short circuits they're doing in the UK, they're doing Southern 100, they're doing the Manx, the TT, and you think, well, actually, they're part of us at Andreas Racing, and I'm the one who's enabled them to race and get their licence to where they've got, they've done that under sort of my control. So that's really nice to see them go off and expand and do them. So it's going to be a cracking season this year, yeah, with all the young riders coming up as well. It's going to be thrilling. Well,
Darryl Hill, we really appreciate you taking the time in what is an incredibly busy schedule that you have. You are a wonderful ambassador, not only for snooker, but also for motorsport as well. Thank you so much for talking to us.
No worries, thanks for having me in.
Darryl Hill with, I'm sure you'll agree, a fascinating insight into what goes on behind the scenes in race control, but also into his career so far as well. I've also posted a link to a video that was done in race control up there at Derby. Do take a look at that. And as Darryl said, if you're interested in being part of the racing team, then do get in touch. They'd love to talk to you. And they're so friendly and welcoming. You'll be able to go up and have a look around, and they really will look after you up there. This podcast is brought to you by Kawasaki Kawasaki Insurance, so find out more about them by going to kawasaki-insurance.co.uk. And until next time on Journey to a Dream, take care. Bye-bye.